Anyhow, I am Reverend Vajra Karuna. I've been a student of Reverend Karuna for 27 years. And
not 57.
No, 27. Back last year, she gave me the great honor of being her first Dharma successor. And that is because that means that you have gone through all the training you need, you have proven yourself to be competent, and you are as competent to meet and to teach as any other person in the tradition. So I thank her very much for that. Now let's get to the stuff. Although having developed an interest in Buddhism as early as my teens, it was not until 1982 that I officially took vows as a Buddhist layperson under the Venerable Karuna Dharma, abbess of the International Buddhist Meditation Center of Los Angeles, who gave me the name Vajra. After several major spiritual breakthroughs, I took the opportunity to become a Buddhist cleric in 1992, December. In December of 1997, the Venerable Karuna decided I was ready for the next stage of ordination, that of a probationary Dharma teacher. By 2002, I had finished all of my training and the probationary periods required, and received at Venerable Karuna's hands the red robe. That's hers, not mine. The red robe of the Zen Patriarch, which allowed me to become a fully qualified independent teacher. In 2008, December, Venerable Karuna bestowed upon me the rare honor of making me her first Dharma heir. In short, a Zen master. Okay. So that's my background. I'd like to say that my husband would be here today. He is also one of Reverend Karuna's students. But he had an accident last night and his knee went out, so that was a problem. But other than that, he would have been here today. Yes, for that few months in there where gay marriage was legal in California, we took the opportunity and got married. In fact, the only opening in West Hollywood was on a 9/11, so that's our anniversary. Okay, now for the official talk. What I'm going to tell you about is more or less the standard official line about sexuality in general in the Zen tradition. And this is, the Zen tradition, remember, is Japanese, Korean, Chinese, Vietnamese, and each one of those traditions have their own twist on it, but I've tried to be as general, as generic as possible, if you can be generic on sex. Anyhow, the Zen tradition deals with sexuality within the broader category of sensual indulgence. The general rule is to avoid abuse of sensuality. This means avoiding an overindulgence in the senses, or what's called hedonism. The great mistake of hedonism, especially sexual hedonism, is that it is usually very selective. It generally tries to elevate sex to a kind of sacred status, but continues to regard all the other bodily functions as merely profane. Zen, non-dualist teachings say that such functions must be regarded as equally sacred if sex is going to be sacred. This means that life as a whole may be elevated to the sacred, but making more out of sex than it deserves is not only false spirituality, but a kind of sacrilegion. The proof of this is seen when we realize that more sexual hedonism arises as a reaction to societal and individual puritanical guilt or shame. Any spirituality based on such reaction is inevitably unhealthy or inauthentic. Zen teaches that the source of sexual hedonism is the delusion that we are our conditional passions rather than the unconditional Buddha nature beyond them. This delusion does nothing short of turning our lives into meaningless suffering. Hedonism in general, and sexual hedonism in particular, not only arises out of this delusion, but it feeds back into it. It does this by acting as a superficial and temporary anesthetizing of our suffering. Sexuality in Zen ought to make life more meaningful, not less meaningful. This is achieved by always being aware that we are far more than any of our sexual needs or wants, or any one of our sexual orientations. When we are so aware, we have no need to feel guilt or shame of the sexual part of our Buddha nature.
We already have the translation.
The translation is up there. This is part of authentic spirituality, which is another way of saying a part of our enlightenment. What is sexual impropriety in Zen? Obviously, for someone who has taken vows of celibacy, then any kind of sexual activity is improper. For the laity, the rules are naturally different. In the West, the standard Buddhist term for sexual impropriety most often has been translated as adultery. However, it means more specifically avoiding any of the following kinds of sexual partners. The last one will need explaining. Anyone else's husband or wife, a betrothed, a minor, and someone else's slaves. Well, we don't have slavery anymore. Well, there's plenty of slavery going on in the world, but we don't have it in most civilized countries. But that term has, in modern times, been redefined as anyone who is institutionalized. That means someone who is in prison, someone who is in a mental institute, etc., etc. So Zen has tried to update the concepts of what is and what is not proper. My understanding of homophobia in a Zen context is my understanding that I've learned over the years from various Asian people, whether they're Chinese or Korean or Japanese or Vietnamese. And so I'm going to give you my understanding of it, which you may relate to, you may not to, but this is all I can give you. There is no strong religious basis in Buddhism to justify overt homophobia. This does not mean that it does not exist. It does. But it usually takes on a far more covert form, and even then has none of the violence so closely associated with Western homophobia. In East Asian cultures, there is a priority placed on marriage for the purpose of having children, especially sons. This is due to the fact that traditionally sons are required to conduct the rites in Confucian ancestral veneration. Anything such as a homosexual lifestyle that would interfere with this filial piety is to be considered wrong. This Confucianist emphasis on preserving the male lineage was certainly one of the factors that led to its view that the feminine should always be subordinate to the masculine. Taoism, on the other hand, took a more gender egalitarian view. This was due largely to the fact that in the chief Taoist scripture, Tao Te Ching, ultimate reality, the Tao, is often described as the mother or mysterious female. However, this more pro-feminine religious view does not mean that all aspects of Taoism have been entirely non-patriarchal, non-sexist, and non-homophobic. Taoism has never been a single unified religious tradition. Instead, it has always been an assortment of sects. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because the Zen tradition has actually two parents. This isn't on the screen. One of the parents is Buddhism, and the other parent is Taoism. We say that Buddhism was the father of Zen, and Taoism was the mother of Zen. And so the Zen tradition is a merging of these two Asian traditions. You all probably know about the yin-yang in Taoism. And this very much, some forms of Taoism have actually been obsessively and oppressively homophobic, actually, especially where it involves yin and yang, yogic sexual mysticism. In this, the feminine yin and the masculine yang are believed to be necessarily complements, whereas yin-yin, we know what yin-yin is, and yang-yang, we know what yang-yang is considered dangerous sexual imbalance. It's never been dangerous for me. The Buddhist-Taoist merging, which gave rise to Zen, while accepting the pan-Chinese view of the yin and the yang, did not adopt any of this sexual mysticism or the related homophobia that went with it. Thankfully. Okay. Now, homosexuality in Zen. Zen makes no moral judgment either or distinction between heterosexual and homosexual, reproductive versus recreational sex, or so-called natural or unnatural sexuality. Why should it? Since ultimately the Zen goal is to get the person to realize a non-dual, non-judgmental awareness of self, in which case all of the differences above are meaningless. What is important in Zen is that one's sexual relationships, whether between opposite genders or same genders, are mutually loving and supportive. And I want to mention one person, Aitken. What's his first name? Richard. Richard Aitken, who just passed away a couple of months ago, was the head of the Hawaiian Zen community. And many years ago, somebody came to him and said, Reverend Aitken, I want to study Buddhism, but I'm gay, and I don't know what to do about it. Can I be both? And Aitken said to him, in order to study Buddhism, in order to study Zen, you first have to be true and honest with yourself, with who you are. And if you haven't gotten there yet, then studying Zen is not going to do you any good. So first get accustomed to and comfortable with your sexuality, and then come back to me, and I'll take you as my student.